I dug up something I shouldn't have. I want you to know that it wasn't my idea. I'm the type to turn around when something isn't sitting right in my stomach. I don't investigate spooky sounds, and I don't go looking for trouble. If it wasn't for my way of life, I don't think I would have ever been dragged into something like this. Have you ever been involved in something that you just didn't understand? Something so bewildering and so far outside your normal day-to-day existence that you freeze right there where you stand. You just go with the flow. You let yourself become a passenger of the moment. You don't know how to exist in the situation, so you choose not to. That's what happened to me. Fight or flight, that ain't the question. For me, the question was whether or not I was going to obey the whims of the situation at hand. You see, I tend a large plot of land in the middle of nowhere. It's just a patch of Appalachia. My family always told me we owned it, but I don't know how true that is. I know no one's ever come to argue. I'm a bit of a social defect. I'm the anxious sort, so living far away from the urban areas is ideal for me. No one comes knocking. No one comes asking questions. It's just me, my land, and my peace. Until this story, of course. Someone did come knocking, and my peace was the last thing they worked to maintain. It was a woman, well-dressed and straight-laced. Her accent made me think of Maine, but I'm not exactly an expert on that subject. She was holding a remote in her hand, something weird, like a controller for a little RC car with a big screen in the middle. I asked and she shared. It was the controller for a drone, she said. She was on a scavenger hunt. That didn't make much sense to me. She said she had been gifted this experience by one of her family members. She was supposed to travel the northeastern United States, finding treasures from her family's history. She had some coordinates around this area, and she chose to fly her drone over the trees to get a lay of the land. Now the drone was lost, and she needed help reaching her destination. Just my luck, that destination was on my land. She saw my house from her overhead view, she claimed. I knew at once she was lying. I knew at once that no one in fancy shoes like hers had come planning to trek through the Appalachian wilderness. I knew that there wasn't any treasure buried out in my woods. I'd walked my land plenty of times and only ever found animal bones. It turns out, animal bones was exactly what she was looking for. Meeting her made even less sense than her story. Every red flag I could imagine was flying high, but I didn't know how to say no. Maybe it makes me unlikable or too passive, but I don't know how to deal with situations like that. I don't know how to deal with people. I agreed, and we set out. I walked her to where she wanted to go and listened to the yarn she spun. Something about a kooky uncle who tries to turn everyone's life into an adventure. She stumbled when I asked the uncle's name, when I asked whereabout he was from. Maybe she was counting on the unreliability of her story. Maybe she knew that when I retold it, it would sound unbelievable from the very start. A young woman appeared outside my cabin. What kind of story is that? We came upon a creek that I was plenty familiar with. We followed it a ways and then turned to cross over a large slab of rock. After another 15 minutes, I was silently commending her. This was a part of the wood that I didn't recognize. The more we walked, the pushier she became. The more her heels snagged in the dirt, the less she tried to convince me of her sloppy little alibi. We led each other to a mound, the size of a grave, I guess. Then, in a real clever way, she told me to dig. She tricked me into saying that I could do it more quickly. She thanked me for volunteering before I could protest. The next thing I know, I'm on my hands and knees and I'm shoveling away the earth with my fingers and palms. Then my fingers touched hair. Red, shaggy. I jumped up and ran back a few paces. The woman didn't flinch. She knew what was under that mound all along. She walked toward it and brushed away a little more of the dirt, revealing what the hair was attached to. I swear it was the face of an ape, maybe the face of a man. Appalachia's known for its mountain people, you know? It was close enough to looking human that I threw up on the spot. She turned back around and dismissed me then. She urged me along like I was a little dog that had followed her into the woods. I stood there for a while, just stunned. I listened as she called someone on her little device and told them that she had a positive ID. I don't know what that means. I do know when I heard the helicopter, I ran. That was too much for me, too much for my anxiety. I didn't need to see any more strange people doing strange things in my woods. Nobody came around asking. Nobody came around telling me to keep quiet. Why would they? I had no proof. I've only got this story, and it isn't very good to begin with. The helicopter hovered over the tree line for a while. I watched it hoist something out and carried off. I went back to the mound a few days later. It was just a hole like any other. There was something buried on my land, something that they wanted. I just hope that it was the only one. My friend and I had a big cabin trip set up for her 30th birthday. It was a big deal, just the two of us. We even rented the place like a year early. I bought an expensive birthday cake and all that. Since we lived in different states now, we planned to meet there Friday night at 6 p.m. Dinner, cake, drinks, whatever. It was nice to have plans. She sent me the address and I popped it in my GPS. Easy. I worked half a day and drove straight from the office. My phone told me it would be about 5 hours. The drive was easy, mostly straight roads, nothing crazy. Because of daylight savings, it got dark early. It was basically dark by 3:30. I've always been a nervous driver, so I was driving slowly. I wasn't in a hurry. After a few eventful hours on the highway, I turned off onto a more scenic road. The trees shaded the narrow road. It was really dark. I turned my brights on so I wouldn't drive off the dang road. I felt like grandma. I was driving way under the speed limit. I checked my distance to the cabin and the GPS said I was still 3 hours away. It was already 4:30. I ignored the nervous energy in my stomach and focused on the road. Slow and steady wins the race, I told myself. I turned on some happy music and kept driving. I pulled into the driveway of the cabin and turned off my car. The eerie silence outside the car creeped me out. The place was pitch black. Definitely looked like nobody was home, but I could tell it was a big, really nice cabin. It stood up on the side of a hill. There were a lot of stairs to the front door. It was 8:15 and I was way late. I tried calling my friend, but I had no reception. Of course, I was in the middle of nowhere. I don't think I saw a house for like the last 2 hours of the drive. Wherever I was, there was nobody around. I left my bags in the car and walked up the stairs to the house. I was almost out of breath by the time I got to the top. The motion sensor lights turned on and almost blinded me, but I saw someone moving inside the house through the window. I knocked on the door and waited. No lights came on. I realized I really had to pee. I banged on the door again. If she was playing some kind of joke, I was way too tired from the drive to think it was funny. I walked around and checked the back door. Everything was locked up. Nobody was here. I couldn't hold it, so I went down to the grass and did my business behind a tree. I was pulling my pants back up when I heard a weird clicking noise. I stood up and listened. I thought my friend might have arrived, but I would have seen headlights. It was totally dark and quiet. I had nothing else to do but wait. I had no plan. I felt like an idiot, and it was getting pretty cold. I got my jacket out of the car and slammed the door. I was feeling upset. I shouldn't be here waiting for my friend. It was her idea to do this trip. I calmed down and went back up to the porch. I froze at the top step. The front door was open. I know that door was closed. I tried the knob like 3 times. I heard the clicking sound again. I saw something pale move inside the house. I almost screamed, but I stopped myself. I yelled hello into the house. Nothing. I pushed the door inward and it creaked open. The motion light behind me turned off and it was totally dark again. I heard the clicking. It was in the house for sure. I moved back to make the motion lights come on. The entrance flooded with light. Right in front of me, hunched on the ground, was a person. Or something. It was ghostly pale and looked sick. It was too skinny to be healthy. And the freakiest part is that it was naked. Its head was down and I could see the filthy, slick black hair on its head. I almost asked if it was okay when it moved, like a twitch. It crawled sideways on all fours. It was too fast. I felt sick trying to register what I was seeing. The motion lights turned off again. This time I did scream. I couldn't help it. I moved backward. I was afraid at any moment the thing was going to touch me in the dark. The lights came on again. It was still there. It tilted its head up at me. Its eyes were all pupils, like it was insane on drugs or something. There was no nose on its face. If it was a face, I'm not even sure. The mouth was a black hole. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at it. I was locked in place. I have never felt fear like that. When I woke up, my friend was leaning over me. I screamed again, and she stopped smiling. I don't really remember our conversation. I just kept repeating that I wouldn't stay there. I wouldn't stay there. She tried to calm me down. She sat me up and said she was going to check out the house. She told me there was nothing to worry about. I watched her go through the front door and turn the lights on. I got to my feet and hurried to my car. I've never felt so irrationally afraid. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. This is the first time I've told anyone about this. My friend and I haven't even talked since. She was that mad. And I don't know how to tell her what I saw. What did I see? I live in the Northwest. There are trails everywhere for hiking and sightseeing. I live in a small town between Seattle and Olympia. I'm not going to say the name, but if you know the area, you might be able to guess. Anyway, long walks and hikes are part of my regular routine. I usually go with a friend, but she wasn't feeling well, so I decided to go on my own. No big deal. I've hiked these mountains and cliffs 100 times. It was early in the morning and foggy. The sky was a flat gray. I brought a jacket. Rain is common out here. The area I went to is pretty desolate. The only people who really hike the trail are the more serious hikers and people who know the area. The terrain is steep and there's lots of slippery spots where the trail is worn smooth. There are other ways up, but they're rocky. That's just as hard in the rain. As the fog dissipated, it started raining. At first a drizzle, nothing out of the ordinary. Then it started really coming down. I slopped up a muddy incline and tried to escape the rain under a dugout space with exposed roots. It mostly worked to stay dry. Well, dry enough. But the rain was really coming down. The path became a gutter. I was basically just waiting out the downpour when I heard something. I thought it was maybe some brush falling from the weight of the rain. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. I listened out for any more sounds, but only heard the hammering rain. A few minutes later, I heard crashing again. This time it was followed by a cracking sound, like a tree had been snapped. I felt a wave of nerves flood through me. I watched in disbelief as a smallish tree tumbled down the path and past me. I jumped back further under the mud awning I was under to stay dry. I slipped in the mud and started sliding down the trail. By the time I could stop myself, I was filthy with mud and soaked through my jacket all the way to my skin. I heard another loud cracking sound. I thought for sure another tree had snapped and was going to tumble down the trail and crush me. Before I could prepare myself in case that happened, I heard a nasty growl from somewhere up the trail. It was so startling and loud that I lost my grip on the branch I was hanging onto. I slipped again and laid on my stomach. The growling continued. I racked my brain. I hiked these trails every weekend for pretty much my entire adult life. There's no wolves or bobcats or anything. It's a safe area. I crawled onto my knees and kept an eye up the trail. The rain was coming down even harder, and that scared me worse because I could hear that growl too easily with all the noise of the rain. Whatever was up there was hiding in the brush, but it kept growling. And then it stopped as suddenly as it started. Everything went quiet except the sound of the rain. Then a horrifying howl filled the air. I could feel it in my chest. I wiped the rain from my eyes. I stood there like an idiot, just waiting to see whatever it was. The growling started again, and there was a smell now, too. It smelled like the zoo, but stronger. It smelled like a tipped-over garbage can was covered in pee. I put my hand over my mouth. The smell seeped through my fingers and into my nose. It smelled like rotten meat. I heard another crash, and this time I saw branches moving. Some of the trees swayed, and more branches broke off the trees. I squinted up the trail. Through the downpour, I could barely make something out, but it was moving. I heard the growl again, and it sounded like something was spitting. I could smell an iron smell, blood, and something else. I was scared now, too scared. I couldn't concentrate. I think I got my bearings a little when I could smell something like a wet dog. I couldn't take my eyes off the shaded area of trees up the trail. Something moved, definitely saw it now. Something was rising and falling, like it was breathing. It was big, and it had blackish wet hair or fur. It rose and stood up on two legs. The back was hunched, but I could tell it was big and strong. Its head was like a dog. I had a Doberman growing up, and it looked like that, but it was hairier like a German Shepherd. The eyes were glowing slashes in its long head. The snout was long and pointed, but there were yellow fangs showing and rows of sharp teeth. Its brown tongue hung from the side of its mouth. It reached its full height and howled. The howl went on and cut through the sound of the rain. I let go of that branch that was steadying me. I slipped and fell on my ass. I slid down the path. The thing kept howling. Its horrifying long head looked straight up at the sky. Finally, I got my feet under me and ran down the trail. I refused to look back even once. I just ran. It had only been maybe a quarter-mile up the trail. I drove home without thinking about how filthy I was or how cold and soaked I was. I tried not to think of anything at all.